She was 20 years old, a college student, the kind of girl who smiled at strangers, remembered birthdays, and always picked up the phone when someone needed to talk. She had her whole life stretched out in front of her like an open road, and she had no reason to believe that road was about to end. The night that changed everything didn't start with a warning. It didn't start with a stranger. It started inside the one place she had always felt completely safe, her parents' home. And the person who shattered that safety wasn't someone who broke in through a window. He walked through the front door. He sat at their dinner table. He had been doing that for years. And what Reynold did to Mia in the hours that followed would eventually lead him to a prison cell and to a shocking ending that nobody, not even the investigators, could have seen coming.
Before we continue, I want to know where you're watching from right now. Drop your country in the comments below. We have viewers joining from all over the world, and it means everything to know you're here. And if you care about stories that bring real awareness to the kind of abuse that hides behind closed doors and family smiles, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos, because these stories is more common than most people think, and the more we talk about it, the harder it becomes for it to stay hidden.
Mia Carter grew up in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's names, left their porch lights on at night, and waved from across the street without thinking twice about it. She was the youngest of two children. Her older brother, Derek, had moved out of state for work, which meant that by the time Mia started college, it was mostly just her and her parents rattling around in that 4-bedroom house on Birchwood Lane. Her mother, Patricia Webb, was a school librarian. Her father, Glenn, worked as an operations manager for a mid-sized logistics company, the kind of job that kept him busy, but always made sure he was home for dinner. They were not a wealthy family, but they were a close one, and Mia had never had any reason to doubt that. She enrolled at Ohio State in the fall and was studying communications with a minor in photography.
She had a second-hand Canon camera that she carried everywhere, to class, to the park, to family dinners. Her friends said she had a gift for capturing moments that other people walked right past without noticing. A cracked sidewalk catching the last light of afternoon, a child's handprint on a foggy car window. She saw beauty in ordinary things, and that said everything about who she was. Her roommate, a girl named Jasmine Cole, later described Mia as the most genuinely kind person she had ever shared a space with. She never complained, Jasmine told a close mutual friend. Even when things were hard, she just kept going. She was the type of person who trusted the people around her, not naively, but openly, because she had grown up in an environment where that trust had always been rewarded. Until the night, it wasn't.
Reynold Mercer had been a fixture in the Carter family's life for as long as Mia could remember. He and Glenn had met in their mid-20s, back when both of them were working entry-level jobs and sharing the same general ambitions about what life was supposed to look like. They had grown up in the same part of town, attended the same church briefly, and somewhere along the way had formed the kind of friendship that outlasts jobs and moves and years of not seeing each other as often as you should. By the time Mia was old enough to form memories, Reynold was simply there. He came to her birthday parties when she was 9, 10, 11. He sat at the Thanksgiving table the year Glenn's own brother couldn't make it.
He was the kind of family friend who filled in the gaps, the extra body at the 4th of July cookout, the guy who helped Glenn retile the bathroom one summer and stayed for pizza afterward. To Mia, he was just Uncle Reynold, not by blood, but by presence, by familiarity, by years of small moments that added up to something that felt permanent. He was in his late 40s by the time any of this happened, divorced, no children of his own, working in property management on the east side of Columbus. People who knew him through Glenn described him as easygoing, someone who laughed easily, told long stories, and had a way of making rooms feel comfortable. He seemed reliable. He seemed safe. And that, as investigators would later reflect, was precisely what made what he did so devastating. Now, here is where the story gets harder to sit with, because in the weeks before everything changed, there were no dramatic warning signs, no loud arguments, no strange behavior that a camera would have caught. Whatever Reynold was carrying inside him, he hid it well. The Carter family had no idea. Glenn trusted him the way you trust someone you've shared 20 years of your life with, completely, almost without thinking. Patricia Webb liked him, and Mia, who had known him since she was a little girl, had no reason to feel anything other than comfortable in his presence. That is what makes betrayals like this one so particularly cruel. They don't announce themselves. They arrive wearing the face of someone familiar.
It was a Friday evening in late October. Mia had driven home from campus, about 40 minutes, to have dinner with her parents. It wasn't unusual. She still came home most weekends, partly because she missed the comfort of it, and partly because Patricia Webb had a habit of sending her back with containers of food that lasted her most of the week. Reynold happened to be there when she arrived. He and Glenn had been watching football, the way they often did on autumn evenings, beers open, the volume just a little too loud. Mia remembers saying hello, hugging her father, going into the kitchen to help her mother with dinner. The evening moved the way 100 other evenings in that house had moved. Easy, unhurried, familiar. After dinner, Glenn fell asleep in his recliner the way he always did on Friday nights, practically before the last dish was cleared. Patricia Webb stepped out to the drugstore. She had mentioned earlier that she needed a few things. And suddenly, without any deliberate arrangement, Mia found herself alone in the living room with Reynold. It was maybe 9 or 9:30 at night.
The television was still on. She didn't think anything of it. Why would she? She had been alone with him before. He was not a stranger. He was someone she had known her entire conscious life. But what happened in those minutes, while her father slept 20 feet away and her mother was 2 miles down the road, would fracture something inside Mia that took years to begin piecing back together. We won't describe the specifics of what occurred. That is not what this story is about. What matters is that Reynold Mercer used the trust that 2 decades of closeness had built, used it as a weapon, and left Mia standing in her parents' living room afterward, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under everything she had ever known.
She drove back to campus that night. She didn't wake her father. She didn't wait for her mother to come home. She got in her car and she drove, and the 40 minutes back felt like 4 hours. And she sat in the parking lot outside her dormitory for a long time before she could make herself go inside. For the next several days, Mia told nobody. Not Jasmine Cole, who slept 6 feet away from her every night. Not her closest girlfriend from high school, who she talked to almost daily. Not her brother Derek, who would have driven across state lines if she had asked him to. She went to her Tuesday lecture. She handed in a photography assignment, a series of black and white images of empty park benches that her professor called some of the most emotionally resonant work she had submitted all semester. She ate meals. She answered text messages. She performed the version of herself that the world expected to see. And inside, she was barely surviving. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about why victims stay quiet. And this is important, so stay with me. When the person who hurt you is a stranger, the math is simpler.
You are the victim. They are the perpetrator. The line is clear. But when the person who hurts you is someone woven into the fabric of your family, someone your father considers a brother in everything but name, the math becomes almost impossible. Because speaking up doesn't just expose one person. It detonates a relationship. It calls your father's judgment into question. It risks turning a family gathering into a crime scene in everyone's memory. Mia knew all of this without being able to put it into words. She was 20 years old, and she was carrying a weight that would have broken most people twice her age. Think about that for a moment. Think about what it means to know the truth and feel completely unable to say it. How would you have handled that? If the person who did this to you was someone your own family loved, what would you have done?
If this story matters to you, if you believe that awareness saves lives, please take a second right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps stories like Mia's reach the people who need to hear them most. And before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's keep going. It was almost 3 weeks after that Friday night when everything broke open. Mia had gone back home briefly to pick up a few things she'd left behind, and she ran into her mother in the kitchen. Just the two of them. Patricia Webb making coffee, Mia standing in the doorway with a duffel bag over her shoulder. Something about that moment, the ordinary warmth of it, the smell of coffee, her mother's face, cracked something loose. She didn't plan to say anything, but she started crying. And Patricia Webb, who had raised this girl and knew every register of her emotion, put down the coffee pot, and crossed the kitchen and asked her what was wrong. And Mia told her, not all of it at once, in pieces, the way trauma comes out when it finally comes.
Patricia Webb didn't cry in that moment. She went very still instead, the way people sometimes do when they receive news so large that their body doesn't know how to process it. She held her daughter. She said, "I believe you." Those 3 words, "I believe you," would later mean more to Mia than almost anything else that happened in the months that followed. Because the next conversation was harder. Glenn came home from work that evening, and Patricia Webb told him they needed to sit down. And Glenn listened. And Glenn's face went through something that Mia could barely stand to watch. Disbelief, confusion, a kind of grief that didn't have a name. 20 years of friendship, 20 years of shared history, all of it suddenly re-examined in a different, terrible light. He didn't want to believe it. Mia later confided to her closest friend, Kamara Reed, who had encouraged her to talk to someone after sensing for weeks that something was wrong. But he didn't say he didn't believe me. He just went quiet, and I think that was almost worse. The family contacted a lawyer the following morning, and then they went to the police. The detective assigned to Mia's case was a woman named Sergeant Holloway, a 12-year veteran of the Columbus PD Special Victims Unit, who had worked cases like this more times than she wanted to count. She met with Mia twice in the first week, first at the precinct, then at a victim advocacy center where Mia felt more comfortable talking. Holloway later described Mia's account as detailed, consistent, and credible. Investigators moved quickly. They gathered evidence, documented a timeline, and reached out to Reynold Mercer within 10 days of the initial report being filed. Reynold denied everything. He sat across from investigators and denied everything with the practiced ease of someone who had convinced himself, or had tried very hard to convince himself, that his version of events was the real one. He told them there had been a misunderstanding. He said Mia had been drinking, which she had not. He said she was confused. He offered an alternative explanation that contradicted the physical evidence investigators had already collected. Detectives weren't buying it. As the weeks passed and more evidence was compiled, corroborating records, communications, physical forensics, the case against Reynold Mercer began to solidify into something that couldn't be explained away. What investigators also uncovered during the course of their work was a pattern of behavior that suggested this was not the first time Reynold had positioned himself close to someone vulnerable. That detail, that quiet, chilling detail, was never far from Sergeant Holloway's mind as the case moved forward. Back in her dormitory, Mia was getting through each day in the way you get through something you never thought you'd have to survive. Slowly, carefully, with a great deal of help from Kamara Reed, from a campus counselor she had started seeing twice a week, and from her mother, who called her every single morning without exception. Reynold Mercer was arrested on a Tuesday morning in mid-January, roughly 11 weeks after Mia had first gone to the police. 2 detectives picked him up at his apartment, a second-floor unit in a building he managed himself. Neighbors later told a local news outlet they had seen the police car, but assumed it was something routine. It was not routine. Reynold was handcuffed and escorted out of the building in a coat he had clearly thrown on in a hurry, and he was placed in the back of a patrol vehicle with the practiced silence of someone who had already made the calculation that there was nothing left to say. He was booked and held on charges of sexual assault. Bail was set, and he remained in custody pending the preliminary hearing.
Glenn Carter sat in his car outside the courthouse that morning for a long time after receiving the call that the arrest had been made. Patricia Webb held her phone in both hands and cried in the school library bathroom during her lunch break. And Mia, who was in class when Kamara texted her the news, stepped out into the hallway, pressed her back against the wall, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. It wasn't over. The trial was still ahead. There would be more difficult days, more questions, more exposure, more moments of having to relive something she would have given anything to forget. But the man who had sat at her family's table and eaten her mother's cooking and watched her grow up since she was a little girl, that man was now sitting in a jail cell. And the truth, which she had been so afraid to speak out loud, had done exactly what she'd hoped it would do.
No one expected what happened next. 6 weeks after his arrest, while Reynold Mercer was being held in the Franklin County Correctional Center awaiting his preliminary hearing, A corrections officer conducting a routine 2 a.m. check found him unresponsive in his cell. Every effort was made to revive him. It wasn't enough. Reynold Mercer was pronounced dead at 2:47 in the morning. The medical examiner's determination was suicide. The news reached Sergeant Holloway before sunrise. She had worked this case for 3 months. She had sat across from Mia, had watched her describe what happened with the careful precision of someone trying very hard not to fall apart, had promised her that the system would work. And technically, the system had worked. The arrest had been made. The evidence had been compiled. But now there would be no trial, no verdict, no moment in a courtroom where Reynold Mercer would be required to sit across from the family he had betrayed and hear the full weight of what he had done read aloud and made official. Mia received the call from her mother that morning.
She sat on the edge of her dorm room bed and she didn't say anything for a long time. And then she said, quietly, "I don't know how to feel about that." That sentence stayed with the people who loved her for a very long time. Because how do you grieve the end of a case that never reached its conclusion? How do you make peace with an ending that gave you safety but denied you justice? There's no clean answer to that. There rarely is. Mia felt, she later said, a complicated mixture of things. Relief that she would not have to sit through a trial, anger that he had taken even that from her, and a deep, aching grief for the version of her life that had existed before that Friday night in October, the version she could never fully get back. If you had been in Mia's position, if you had spent months fighting to be believed, fighting to be heard, fighting to reach a courtroom, and then the person responsible died before justice could be formally served, how would you have processed that? What would you have needed in that moment? She sat on the edge of her dorm room bed and she didn't say anything for a long time. And then she said, quietly, "I don't know how to feel about that." That sentence stayed with the people who loved her for a very long time. Because how do you grieve the end of a case that never reached its conclusion? How do you make peace with an ending that gave you safety but denied you justice? There's no clean answer to that. There rarely is. Mia felt, she later said, a complicated mixture of things. Relief that she would not have to sit through a trial, anger that he had taken even that from her, and a deep, aching grief for the version of her life that had existed before that Friday night in October, the version she could never fully get back. If you had been in Mia's position, if you had spent months fighting to be believed, fighting to be heard, fighting to reach a courtroom, and then the person responsible died before justice could be formally served, how would you have processed that? What would you have needed in that moment?
Mia Carter finished her junior year of college. She changed her minor from photography to psychology. She said she wanted to understand people better. She wanted to understand how someone she had known her whole life could carry something that dark so quietly and for so long. She has spoken in private about her hope to one day work with survivors of trauma. She still takes photographs. She still calls her mother every day. And she has said, in the time since everything happened, that the one thing she wants people to take away from her story is not the tragedy of it, but the importance of saying the thing that feels impossible to say. Because the silence is what predators count on. The silence is the second crime.
They count on the fact that your love for the people around you will be stronger than your need for justice. They count on the fact that the closeness, the dinners, the birthdays, the 20 years of accumulated trust will be enough to keep you quiet forever. Mia refused to stay quiet, and that matters. That will always matter. Stories like this one are painful to tell and painful to hear, but they are necessary. Because abuse does not always arrive in the form of a stranger. It often arrives wearing the face of someone you've known since you were small. And if you know someone who is carrying something heavy, something they seem unable to say out loud, please be the person who makes it a little easier to speak. Please be the person who says, "I believe you." Because those 3 words can change everything.
Drop the word awareness in the comments if you believe that silence protects abusers. Let's fill the comment section. And before you go, If you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. We cover story that matters, stories that don't always make the front page, but live in the lives of real people every single day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming. See you in the next one.